So, good evening. I would like to apologize for the participants that the program has been delayed. We will try to catch up with this session, which is actually the last session of today. Good evening to everybody. We have the pleasure to have two panelists who have already participated in a previous panel, so they are already within the spirit of the event, and we will follow up with some questions which are very important. The session is energy investment challenges, and it could have been, of course, a different title, since we have already spent almost 2 days discussing the challenges under the new energy crisis. So we are again going to discuss an issue which engages the new infrastructure requirements, the new challenges that we have to face as an industry, as an economy in Southeast Europe. In the previous years, this topic has always been discussed from a different perspective, I must admit. Since the establishment of Southeast Europe Energy Dialogue back in 2007, I do recall personally that always we had presentations about the energy infrastructure requirements for Southeast Europe. Today, however, the design and the discussion is driven from another parameter. The parameter is different. Now it looks like we need to refocus and challenge the sources which were supposed to be transferred with the energy infrastructure. And also given the fact that the EU policy already has been mentioned to be that we need to phase out the Russian gas by 2027, it is indeed very unclear if this plan will be realistic. And we have spent 2 days already discussing all these issues. And we will try in this panel to highlight a few topics, of course, because we cannot spend more time to discuss about the challenges on energy investments, because these may be discussed from various perspectives: financial, political, geopolitical, sources which will be transferred through the energy infrastructure, and of course always addressing the three pillars. I would like also to welcome my friend Mikhail, who is now, I see, connected. It's a long time we haven't seen you, and we are very happy at least that you have made it to connect today with this panel. The other members of the panel are well known. My colleague Andonis will be the first one who will take the floor. We will go with a different approach than the one we have designed because of the limitation of time we have, and we need also to give Mrs. Taboulis the floor to recap on some conclusions following these 2 days sessions. So Adonis will make a very brief presentation. I would say maybe it's going to be a dialogue more on the natural gas trading platform, which has been recently launched also in March 2022 in Greece. And actually this platform, as we know, couples the other 4 markets of the annex, and it is very important on the evolution on the energy infrastructure, because it affects actually this wholesale gas trade platform affects and gives a push for new energy infrastructure projects in the region. Also, it accommodates the market coupling on the wholesale gas trading. So Adonis, I would like, I don't know if they're going to put the PowerPoint just to have it as a part of the presentation, but I would like if you could highlight what are the main elements which are positive elements which will promote more the discussions that we have for energy security, for expansion of energy infrastructure projects. Give us a few topics on that.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Papamichalopoulos, and I would like to thank ENA also for the opportunity to take part in the energy dialogue, and Mr. Staboulis in particular. So I won't go through the entire presentation. I just want to provide the basic elements that actually show what is the immediate impact of the natural gas trading platform and its introduction into Greek legislation as of March 2022, on how wholesale natural gas trading is performed. So I won't go through the introduction, but what I want to underline is that, first of all, let's take a step back and see how natural gas wholesale trading was performed before this reform. So transactions were actually over-the-counter transactions which were executed on a bilateral basis between the transaction parties. So there was not an organized wholesale market, while the Greek TSO, DESFA, was performing any balancing actions via the balancing platform. So, and also, as a result of the lack of an organized market, there was a lack of transparency as regards price reporting, which this is something that has now changed after the introduction of the natural gas trading platform. So now we have an organized wholesale market where the participants may correct their short-term position in the market. Also, bilateral transactions continue to be, they are still possible under this framework. But also the same applies with regards to the balancing actions of the TSO. But these are now performed under the trading platform. Now, I won't go through the key elements in their entirety, just wanted to underline that as regards market access, the trading platform is open to entities that come from outside the EU, so it's not only accessible to EU participants or participants from the EEA. There is an organized price reporting, which is performed by NX, and also the participation of certified brokers, as each participant is required to appoint one certified broker so as to conduct the negotiation process. I won't go through the technicalities of a wholesale transaction, just wanted to underline that apart from how a specific transaction is per se structured, what is of utmost importance, of course, is the possibility of coupling of the markets. So we understand that the introduction of the natural gas trading platform contributes to the creation of a robust trading market due to the possibility of coupling with the gas markets of our neighbors. So what next? Since this is a panel which is focused on investment, there are certain factors to consider here as to whether the natural gas trading platform is going to boost investment. First of all, there are certain economic opportunities. First of all, we are waiting for the commissioning of new gas-fired power plants. There are also positive economic prospects based on the Greek TSO's projections, which show that, and as we also discussed in previous panels, we expect an increase as regards to the demand of natural gas and LNG in particular. And also there is, of course, the factor which is related to infrastructure. I won't go into the details because, especially yesterday, most panelists refer to these elements in great detail. But we are also going to have increased interconnectivity and coupling with the markets which are in Southeast Europe. And also the regulatory framework due to the introduction of the trading platform is improving. And I just wanted to show you, these are the rankings of EFET regarding the gas hubs in Southeast Europe. And it seems that these rankings refer to the structure and the framework of the market and show that there is an increase in the rankings of Greece, but also it seems that the trading platform addresses these 4 points, which were actually issues that where Greece was ranked with the rating was 0. So now with the trading platform, we have the price reporting, we have the participation of market makers, liquidity providers, in other words, certified brokers, and also we have the performance of the existence of a spot market. So we have spot liquidity. Okay, so just to conclude, and this is also the title of the presentation, can Greece become a gas hub via this regulatory reform? Well, there are certain conditions to take into account, and I conclude with this. We need, first of all, the robust interconnection infrastructure and the differentiation of supply are critical. And the existence of the trading platform also reinforces the new gas infrastructure, investments in new gas infrastructure. Secondly, security of supply. Third, competitive prices, which is an important element so as to, in order to have liquidity in the market. And lastly, an effective dispute resolution mechanism would also greatly help towards Greece becoming a forum for wholesale transactions in the area of Southeast Europe. Thank you very much. I try to be brief.
Okay,
Thank you.
And you did great.
Thanks.
Under the circumstances. Of course, we continue to refer to requirements of energy infrastructure. And we have all been advising clients, and we have been engaged with design, implementation, financing, and operation in the long term. I would like to ask Slatko on this matter, because in principle, everybody is capable to design and submit a proposal for a project. However, having heard already in the previous sessions the requirements, the needs of the countries of Southeast Europe, and in general the political and economical situation because of the energy crisis due to the war in Ukraine, we had in place the EU taxonomy regulation, and this has been promulgated around July 2020. Tell us your experience from your position. Is this still a tool that, because this was focused on the Green Deal, now we hear that we need to focus also to nuclear, to fossil. Is this going to be affected, this EU taxonomy, or it is carved on stone and it cannot change?
Well, thank you, Chair. I will disappoint you. I don't have a presentation, so I will say just
no,
a few
you
words.
don't disappoint us at all.
Now, first of all, when talking about the energy investment challenges, we have to recall one principal issue, and it is the fact that in the sphere of energy, the energy policy falls within what is called shared competences within the EU. Under Article 224 of the Treaty of the Functioning of the European Union, which means legally that the EU has a leading role in this context, and the member states follow. And those countries which are not member states do this via the energy community in practical terms. But the implementation is not at EU level, it's at national level. And from this point of view, documents like the EU taxonomy, the Green Deal, I would say also recently the Repower EU plan, have a very key role to play. But the problem is that it is sometimes, particularly now, there are lots of reasons where we can note extensive contradictions. And these contradictions lead in practical terms to the fact that on the one side, the EU members are obliged to follow the EU policy, but when it comes to the implementation, there are problems. And I will give you an example with the nuclear and with the coal in particular terms. You mentioned 2020. In between, there was also a mechanism called Just Transition Mechanism, which is linked particularly to the coal area. And there's a regulation there which explicitly notes that no EU funding will be provided for further development of the coal and of nuclear, explicitly. And at the same time, we hear, and we also heard today, and we heard also from Greek representatives, that countries are in a way pushed forward to consider not only using what they have as coal capacities, but even further develop them. When it comes to nuclear, the situation is a little bit more complex because after the UK left the EU, there is a change of balance. Now less countries in the EU have nuclear power. There are 13 countries which have nuclear and 14 which do not have. Before it was 50-50 split, which also influences the EU attitude towards nuclear to a very big extent. And I mentioned this Just Transition Mechanism and the denial of financing for nuclear, but if you take the Repower EU planning, which is from 18th of May this year, you will see particular references both to nuclear and to coal as supporters for saving the situation, keeping the energy security issue. So there is a need for more clarity on the one side, firstly at European level, and then at national level, because countries like Bulgaria, for example, I would say are quite confused in this case. We rely 40% on nuclear and about 40% on coal for our energy security. And in long-term planning, we shall consider relying on that. But this means that there should be more clarity at EU level, so we are not confused when it comes to the implementation at national level. And last point which I want to raise, there is certainly a lot more to say, but I would like to link this issue to the investment challenges also from the perspective of the social dimension. There was a reference to the energy poverty, which I want to underline is not an energy issue, it's a social issue, because the energy sector is a market sector and should develop under market principles. But anyhow, energy poverty is terminus technicus which is used. Investors are those who can help fighting the what is called energy poverty, because it's the investors who provide employment, who pay taxes. And the energy poverty is something which the government should deal with via their social policy, and this means more employment and more social benefits for those who need support. That is, to wrap it up from my side, the key issue is to have firstly another look and reconsider the energy policy at EU level, including from the point of view of the EU taxonomy, the role of coal, the role of nuclear included. And the second thing, to give more freedom to the national authorities to adjust, particularly in moments of crisis like today. I'm ready to elaborate more on that because it's a very long story, but I'll stop here currently.
Okay, thank you so much. It has been obvious from our earlier discussions that the political message or the political decisions are not in a way that give comfort to the sector, to the energy sector, to the business. In other words, they change depending on other factors, which confuses every player. Also, the regulators who are supposed to be independent, and they are organized as independent authorities, they have to switch their own policies because they regulate and they monitor the markets based on some principles, and then they realize that these principles are changed, and they have, again, as an authority, imposed these new principles. This is a chaotic situation, particularly nowadays, where we have to address the crisis due to the war situation we had in Ukraine. Again, going back to the energy infrastructure discussion, I do remember, and this was almost a joke in our previous, let's say, private discussions, that there are too many networks, too many pipelines around the area. And at that time, we were saying, who's going to finance all this energy infrastructure? There was no discussion at that time and who is going to provide the raw material, which will be transferred through. We had the sources, but the sources were specific. There was no plan B. That what will happen if there is a war situation in one region, which will affect the flow of the gas, of the electricity, or the oil. Nowadays, I believe everybody is thinking about the alternative sources. So they are now really discussing what is Plan B. And I really took that note when you said that the market works. Yes, it works, but it works with only one area of conflict, which is today in Ukraine. If another conflict occurs in the area of Shah Deniz or other, where TAP is absorbing and is feeding the system, Central Europe actually, with gas, then we have another situation. And on this occasion, I want to ask our friend Skelkim here. There are challenges, and in your country as well, being also one of the host countries of TAP, and also very adjacent to the app, other project. What is your opinion about these challenges? Promoting these projects under the today's circumstances and challenges that we have. Do you believe that this would evolve? And if they finally find their way to be implemented, is there enough time? Or at that time, the balances will have changed, most probably, because these projects are not going to be implemented in such a short time period.
Yeah, thank you. When I saw the subject of the discussion, which is energy investment challenges, well, this is such a broad subject. And personally, I'm also lecturing at the university, and one of the subjects is project risk assessment. And actually, when we say risk, when we say challenges, it's actually risk assessment. And the approach I give to the students is that I first explain, because in every step we do in our life, everything we do in our life, we're faced with risks. And then we're talking about projects, and then the very first thing is to understand the projects. And then I go and explain all the components. And now to go, I believe the audience is familiar with project management and project risk. So it's a very, very long way to go through. But as we're talking about energy projects, the very first feeling we have is that they're very large. But we also have very small projects like 2 megawatt photovoltaics or the small hydropower plant. And then projects are very specific. They are also related to the country, and the risks are interrelated. Now, if I go to projects like TAP or like EAP, these are very large scale. And the previous panel already discussed about it. You need to have the political commitment. Without the political commitment, you don't get ahead of it. And then, unfortunately, very often, the politicians, they're not the experts, and they have their agendas. So it's our primary task to get the politicians being convinced that it is in their benefit that they get the project supported. And then, being an investor, of course, I believe every one of you is aware about return on investment, IRR, where the financing is to come from, and so on. What are the market perspectives? Well, I'm very sensitive. What is the fiscal and legal stability? And as we're talking about TAP, TAP asked for a host government agreement in Albania, and it was passed by the parliament. So then there is no changes. And actually, there have been changes later on. And then the different acts of the AGA played their role that we're supposed to do. Business environment, very important. We know Albania is a contracting party. We have the EU acquis in the energy field already implemented, but there are several challenges that we all know, so it's not that easy. The other thing that TAP was faced is the government and administrative capacities. So very often we were obliged to think about ways to support the administration to perform their own task, but then in a way that the decision making was not influenced by top. So these are the kind of challenges that projects like this are expected to happen. Another major challenge in Albania were the land ownership titles. I mean, the land went through, during communist time, the old land was declared as belonging to the state. And then when the system changed, it was distributed among people, but then there are no proper records, no ownership titles. So what we did, we had to reestablish what we called the legal cadastre, and then thereafter we had to enter into agreements with all the owners. And another very sensitive aspect is acceptance, social acceptance. So a key stakeholder are the local communities, are the central politics, but also local politics. And this is very dynamic. I mean, if the politics are supportive in the very beginning, this does not mean that it will stay the same way up to the very end. And if the local politics, the local administration is supportive and welcoming in the very beginning, it won't be the same during the implementation. So is for the local communities. So these are the kind of elements a project will be faced with, and then strategies need to be prepared in advance. So when things come, you have instruments like a corporate social responsibility. You have to demonstrate it first and not leave the situation end up in a crisis. So those are the kind of aspects that a project of large scale is expected to be faced with. One other aspect I want to mention, I'll end there, is that very often there are kind of projects, they do the so-called ESIA, Environmental and Social Impact Assessment. And they do it, and because they are the investors, they do it the best way possible to look good. And then this happens even without having a public consultation, even without talking about communities. And what has happened? Several small hydropower plants have been built. They've taken away the water that the villages and the communities have been living with. And now they end up with the situation that the communities, they block the roads. They say, you don't leave water for us. And the whole life of the community is impacted. So the guys, they believed they were smart in the very beginning and went ahead and got all the approvals. And now when the project is to perform and to deliver, and then they are blocked. So that's the kind of aspects I thought were helpful to share.
Well, thank you very much for the highlights. I'm sure that the audience has taken very good notes of these key milestones, key issues in the analysis. As you said earlier, this is a big discussion. We can go on
Right.
and add more items on this discussion. Since I would like to bring into the discussion my friend Mikhailo, who is our partner in Serbia, and he normally attends all the events of ENA here in Athens and Thessaloniki as well. So please feel free to give us your insights. We don't have another topic. The topic is as broad as possible. So you have the option to take advantage of that and give us your opinion.
Thank you, Gus. I'll do my best. First of all, good day from Belgrade to everybody in Thessaloniki and some of the guys who are online. I'm very grateful to be part of this conference, and generally I appreciate efforts to make the IENA Institute one of the most respectable institutions in energy sector in Southeast Europe, and I'm also glad to be part of that action. We in Serbia generally learned, that's some sort of historical legacy, to follow information, analysis, reviews of reality from various sources from all over the world, from the east, from the west, from the north and south. And in order to have an insight into the real reality. At the beginning of this my short discussion or presentation, I would like to mention at least a few events from contemporary global politics that are rarely or even not mentioned in the regular media outlets. First, on the eve of the Olympic Games in Beijing, on February 4th, 2022, the presidents of Russia and China adopted a joint statement on the international relations entering a new era and the global sustainable development. Please find and read that document. It's long, around 20 pages. Also, the second moment is that these days, the International Economic Forum in St. Petersburg is being held at the same time as our conference. Until last year, about 150 countries were present at this global conference. This year, on the 25th anniversary of that conference, the presence is about 90 countries, which is registered for that event, which is with the highest representative, mostly from BRICS countries. There will be a significant talks on energy at the St. Petersburg Forum conference this year. And the third issue, which I would like to mention, is that, as you know, the World Energy Council is the world's oldest energy association, and they owned a global congress every 3 years. The World Energy Council planned to have the 25th Congress multiplied by 3. It means 75 years of existence of that association in October 22, also in St. Petersburg, with a title, Energy for Humanity. The management of World Energy Council will probably declare that it's not possible to hold this gathering for their own reasons. This is just beginning of my idea for a discussion, to swing discussion a little bit wider and to show how the politics and ruling of the world influence the investment and the development of energy systems in every country, including us in Serbia. Serbia, as you know, is one of the few European countries that is not established sanctions against Russia, with serious reasons and explanations. As you know, also, in Serbia, the elections, presidential and parliament, is over. The new government is going to be formed during the summer. And also there is a lot of turbulence in energy sector, plus imported inflation of pricing, energy pricing and other pricing all over the world, which makes Serbia vulnerable, but still strong economic and fiscal discipline and performance still exists. The first problem in energy sector in Serbia is security of supply, especially for autumn and winter. High dependence on oil and gas sector from Russia put us in a situation to experience a big pressure from European Union, United States, and Western world. It is visible that geopolitics of energy influence current energy situation in Serbia. The second problem is energy transition to green agenda. A reduction of coal use, as you know, we are about in a production of electricity, we are 70% getting electricity from coal. Restructuring of major state-owned companies, reforms of the electricity and gas market, significant expansions of renewable energy sources and implementation of energy efficiency, and particularly taking care of energy poverty. According to the last estimate by Ministry of Energy, about 35 billion euros needs to be provided for all of these plans up to the 2040. Since half of estimated amount will be used for new renewable energy sources installation, there is also a need for storage capacities, especially in pumped storage hydropower plants, which we already have plans for 2 major pump storages. And also, we are trying to expansion of existing gas storage in northern part of Serbia. Generally, we are not officially in an emergency situation, and the world, but the world is essentially in some sort of emergency situation. Crisis is it will last and lead to the great recession, as there is a lot of predictions. World Bank growth projections for this year, where it used to be a 5.7 or 4.4, right now is for the whole world is a 2.7, and further decline is expected. In terms of investment, the renewable energy sources investment is delegated to private sectors, private investors, while the government is taking care of huge incumbent companies and functioning of energy system as a whole. That's the situation right now. Who knows what is going to happen in 2 or 3 years? As you are aware, generally there is a current economic war in the world, or war for resources in which the rules are evidently not defined. In such situation, collateral damages are inevitable and unpredictable. Political and economic restructuring in the world is underway. The creation, looks to me, of new political architecture is evidently underway. That's my position. I just prepare a few notes for this intro speech, but for a discussion, I'm ready to be part of further discussion. Thank you, Gus.
Yeah, my dear Mihailo, thank you so much for the focus presentation, the items that you picked up. You gave us a broader picture of what is happening. You remind us actually of the driving factors of the situation where we are today, or what's going to drive it also in the forthcoming months or years. And everybody, I believe, who is in this position is doing his homework, trying to understand, guess, or take a position in the market for the next years. Trade will become indeed very difficult of electricity, of gas, and there is nothing actually which drives in a very organized way a discussion to resolve the issues. As you said, there are different political centers which discuss and decide, and they have a coalition, in other words, how to treat these issues, how to handle them, how to manage them, or how to defend their positions. But there is no unity in order to address the main issues which all of the countries, the member states of the European Union, third countries, all of them discuss, irrespective where they belong. Every state discusses about energy supply, energy efficiency, security of energy supply, but there are no long-term measures, finally. There was no plan B, actually, to address the situation today. And we all know about the solidarity regulation of EU, particularly tailor-made for Southeast Europe, the CESEC Treaty about solidarity and interconnection of gas and electricity. If one member state was in urgency, the other member state, it didn't work, but it was drafted, it was there. So this is another example for our politicians that it's nice to draft and regulate, but finally these instruments are not implemented in real life. I don't know if my friends have any comment to add to what Mihailo just presented. If there are a few comments, I'm happy to hear, and then we will need to close the session because we are behind schedule, and this is unfortunately what happens when you take the last session of the conference.
May I just one or two sentences? In my view, at European level, it's time for complete revision of the EU energy policy. Complete revision of the EU energy policy. And I can go in details, but it will take 2
It looks
hours.
like it's an
Right.
obvious.
Absolutely. So, at national level, for me, there are two things which are, in a way, linked to the first point, because, as I said, formally the EU energy policy has a leading role along the EU legislation. But at national level, there are two things which have to be taken care of. First, the national governments, the national authorities, including the regulators, should be much more active when the EU policy is formulated. That is not to be in a passive role and then to say, sorry, it's Brussels which said this. That's why we have to do it. And the second issue is that the business should be given much more freedom. There was a statement by one of the speakers before, less state, more market. This is what I wanted to say.
I think this is a very good message, and it complies with the audience conclusion as well, following a 2 days discussion and exchange of ideas and positions of what are the main reasons that have brought us in this situation and what can happen in order to avoid similar situations in the near future. So thank you so much for taking also this last session and being members of this. Thank you very much, Mihailo, for joining us, and we look forward to meet you soon. And I think we can move on for the next session, which is actually Mr. Stabolis will do. Eric, it's John? Okay, John.
I'm going to start with an absolutely basic proposition that came up in a rather heated moment. And that was from Charles Ellenus that said, none of us challenges climate change. I think it's worth repeating that point because an awful lot of it, discussions concern fossil fuels and what we're going to do. And it just makes the point that all of our discussions were within the framework of tackling climate change as well as the current crisis. Secondly, what have we learned at the moment? Energy security is back. Only today we discover that Russian gas is no longer going to France, the result of a 40% cut at least in pipeline deliveries via Nord Stream. And what does this mean? According to Gazprom, there's a technical explanation due to the failure to repair compressors and the inability to repair compressors. Others think there's a rather more sinister motive. And if there is, given the fact that Mr. Macron was in Kiev just yesterday, is this presaging further cut-offs or limitations for Italy and for Germany? Are we in effect having to deal with, as some analysts say right now, a position in which the amount of LNG coming into Europe is not going to be sufficient to replace the immediate loss of gas from Russia? And then where do we go? Well, Ukraine, as was remarked by Charles Ellenus again, has brought home the enduring importance of fossil fuels. And not just fossil fuels, but pipelines. We've had talk about the East Med pipeline, and it prompted a comment, of course, from James Watson, no less, that pipelines are back as an EU potential for financing. That could, of course, mean a serious relook at things like the Ionian Adriatic pipeline. Then there's another point, signals. What kind of signals are we moving to? What are we getting? Again, I'm quoting James Watson. Do we need a Marshall Plan to support LNG infrastructure? I'm not sure that he's right. I think Marshall Plan was much bigger than that. This is a practical thing that could be done within the EU framework. But the point is there, we have to think big on some things, and we need synergies. I'm struck by another comment from Leodrolos. Modelling is one thing, practicality is another. What we've got is a thing in which renewables policy is not necessarily being delivered. Or perhaps what we really mean to say is that renewables are not yet delivering their full potential. And why? Well, you have to start thinking of all sorts of things. One point that is strongly said throughout the whole of these discussions is the architecture of our energy system needs to be changed. We need what people refer to as an enabling framework. But what goes into this enabling framework? Well, a wealth of things. To start with, a whole variety of different fuels. Are we talking not just fossil fuels? We're talking about how you fit hydrogen into it. We're talking about how you fit nuclear into it. We had the briefest of mentions of geothermal, as in Turkey. Quite a lot, of course, about wind and solar. But how do we integrate all these? And if we're going to have an effective market infrastructure, and we had constant discussion about the need to balance markets, how do we then move on to ensuring that those markets can be balanced? Well, one answer, and a very important part of that answer, is storage. And we did have some practicalities. We heard from Motor Oil in Greece about practical development of battery storage. We heard from Bulgaria about the major proposed expansion of pump storage. But we're still faced with volatility. We're still faced with the problem of pricing being up and down, of, as was pointed out by at least one speaker, how can we oversee an energy system if we are still dependent on just one supplier and that we do not have control, or even, one might argue in a strange way, commercial influence over that supplier? And then we come to the points. What is a market supposed to do? We heard that markets would make things fairer. We heard that they would maximize social well-being, social welfare. Does that mean that they will have low prices? Or does it mean something rather different? That they will have and help achieve the lowest prices possible? And are the lowest prices possible what we're actually needing? Because it comes back to the whole question of money. We had that worrying slide of Gazprom earning 93 billion from its gas sales, of which 57 billion came from the EU. And then we have another form of money that we heard, affordability. First of all, it was electric cars. Apparently, 60% of households in Western Europe can afford electric cars, but only 20% of what I take to be Central and Southeast Europe can afford electric cars. That's a major difference if you're trying to think to arrange a market-led changeover that will help improve the environment. And it comes back to a point that was made by Professor Ayunut, the need to factor in the human cost, the cost of living, affordability. I made much the same points yesterday. I'm just praying I don't have to make the same point in 6 months' time when winter comes. Thank you. And now, Costas, are you coming over? Yes. Yep. Before he comes, can I just say my thanks to all of you for having me. Thank you.
Thank you so much, John, for summing up the conference in your unique way, the distance, the necessary distance, and yet the actual quotes from speakers. So this presentation, I think, that John made sums up very well the spirit of the conference. From my view and from Iana's point of view, I would like to thank, first of all the speakers, the panelists, the moderators, and of course the participants for traveling to Thessaloniki, coming up here to participate in this 1.5-day gathering. I would also like to thank our sponsors. We have several sponsors this year. Not so much money, but the plurality matters. We had from all different areas of energy, and that's very important. And of course, media sponsors, and in Greece and outside. Sonar Acoustics for being very patient with us all this time and setting up this very demanding technical backup, which is necessary to combine the online and the actual here. And of course, the hotel staff who served us very well during these 2 days. For me, this energy dialogue was one of the most difficult to organize in view of the complexity, but also very rewarding in the sense that I think we managed to have many speakers from various different countries, more than any other time. And we saw this vitality with the online connections. We had no cancellations. People said they're going to join, they joined in. And they did this enthusiastically, even if we were late with some of our running of the conference. So there was an enthusiasm. And I think this enthusiasm was natural in the sense that, yes, they recognize that this forum is very open, very free. People are frank and express honest views without trying to hide political or business interests. And I think that's what keeps this dialogue going on for many years. People are realizing that this is a place more approachable and easier to come and express your views. And that had been the objective right from the beginning. So in that sense, yes, I'm very happy. Of course, the dialogue takes place at a time when there is energy turmoil. There's an energy crisis, no doubt. We see this in the prices. We see this in what's happening. John referred to the actual situation today where gas is getting gradually pushed away from France and several other countries. We don't know whether we are going to have enough gas next fall, next winter. This is a reality. Already some countries, some governments are preparing for blackouts. That's an open secret. They are making contingency plans. So we are going through difficult times energy-wise. And we are in the field, I think we had been predicting this, we had been talking about this, and this is where the crunch comes as far as policy is concerned, as far as political maneuvering is concerned, as far as political posturing is concerned at the EU level. And I think James Watson yesterday and Slavko Nekov today were very clear about this. I think if something has emerged out of this discussion, in my view, is that yes, we need a revision of energy policy at EU level now, not next month or next winter, now. Because if they start working now, maybe they could deliver in a few months. And we see that there's mistakes being made purposely, not accidentally, of course. Before coming here, one of my colleagues said, you released this background paper and there's a mistake there. I said, what mistake? You said that the EU is having a plan to substitute 2/3 of gas by the end of the year, Russian gas by the end of the year. That's a mistake. He said, it's 1/3. I said, no, it's not a mistake. I've checked this many times. Repower 1, Repower 2. So this is, as we said lately in one of our, newsletters, referring to the taxonomy, but it equally holds for this point of view that there is cloud cuckoo land. I mean, some people in the Commission, they live in governments in cloud cuckoo land, or they use this as a pretext because they have other ulterior motives. So this is coming out very clearly from our discussions. I don't think I need to elaborate anymore on this. We discussed a lot of things. From a practical point of view, all the presentations and discussions, the ones we have papers and presentations will be loaded on a microsite. We also have a video tape. We have videotaped the whole proceeding, so there is going to be a video after we do some we'll take care of the corners and try to make it very smooth, so there will be a video of the whole proceedings. Not instantly, but in about 1 or 2 weeks' time, it's going to be there. So everybody will receive an email with all the information and the data. So thank you once again. And there is a bus waiting for us. The people who are going to visit this center by the Network Electricity Distribution Center will go with a bus. The bus is already outside the lobby. We will leave in about quarter of an hour. And after that, you're all invited to an informal dinner at a restaurant called Dores, which is near the White Tower. So, good night. Thank you. Have a good trip home, whoever is traveling. And see you very soon again in one of our next events. Okay?